Good afternoon, everybody. You should never start a relationship with an apology, they say, but that's exactly what I'm going to do for those people who attempted to join us on a LinkedIn live event about 10 minutes or 20 minutes ago. So never work with children or animals or untried technology. It did actually work on the run through we did, but it didn't work 20 minutes ago. So whilst you'll all enjoy getting some time back over lunchtime that you thought you were going to listen to me and Ben, now we have something to send you. So let's start again. My name's Alistair Marshall. I'm the director of a business called Professional Services BD here in Sydney, and I've helped more than 100 law firms to attract new clients and win more profitable business. And I am joined today to discuss culture and how it affects BD and how it's interrelated with Mr. Ben Deverson, who's alive and well in sunny Brisbane. Good afternoon, Ben.
Good afternoon, Alistair. And I actually believe that it's the daylight saving issue, because we are actually an hour apart, that caused this problem. And again, sincere apologies to all our guests that joined the live cast. That technology did defeat us, but we've adapted, we've overcome. We are aiming to have this live stream recorded for you and in your inboxes today. But thank you. As Alistair said, my name's Ben Deverson. I'm the director and founder of Lawganised. We're an advisory practice that exclusively supports law firms in Australia and around the world. Our focus is on everything that a law firm needs to do, bar the practice of law. So if you can imagine everything that it takes to operate a law firm, from the front door to the back door, from people to property, to systems, to technology, to processes, to operations and governance, you name it, we look after it. And similar to Alistair, Lawganised has supported a little bit over 120 law firms globally now. So, but this is a fantastic topic. Alistair and I have known each other for around about 10 years now. Alistair was invited by my former firm when I was a CEO to come in and give us a bit of help with our own business development activities. And since then, we've maintained a pretty strong relationship. And whenever I'm in Sydney, Alistair's the first man I call for a coffee.
And vice versa when I'm in Brisbane.
Indeed, indeed.
So I might start. We must have hit on a nerve here, because at a week's notice, we had about 250 people sign up. So it was obviously a topic that registers with people. So culture is overly talked about now, the C word, it's everywhere. So can I just start with asking you what you think culture is in a law firm? What does it look like? How would we know it exists?
Look, great question, Alistair. Look, to go to the textbook, and I'm not usually a textbook guy, but the textbook definition of culture is the personality and character of your firm. And that's demonstrated by things such as values and beliefs in leadership, and it's also in behaviours. And it really, in my view, comes down to a myriad of interpersonal relationships and the way that you do things and the way that you interact. And in a law firm, that happens from, as I mentioned in the way Lawganised works, from front door to back door. It works from the smile on the receptionist's face, the way that that person greets guests, all the way through to how clients are engaged and how clients' feedback is dealt with. And knowing that, Alistair, what I wanted to do was throw back to you what you see in relation to culture, and particularly the symptoms where you believe, culture perhaps isn't that great.
Well, from a BD perspective, and please forgive me, everyone, just to let you know, we're not planning on doing a slide deck. This is an in front of the fire discussion, but I have referenced some articles that do actually appear on my website for you. So forgive me if I reference them. The types of things I would say is that only one or two fee earners or partners are responsible for BD. So it's not a team-wide thing. They're very heavily reliant on one on two rainmakers, as the phrase goes. Things like websites don't produce any leads because it's no one's job to look after it and make it accountable to anybody. You think things like BD wouldn't be part of appraisal meetings. It doesn't get much talked about in partner meetings. People talk about finances, but they don't talk about things that necessarily drive those finances. There might not be incentives or bonus schemes for people. That would be a sign. People might not have individual documented business plans. That's a common one. Or it's very rare that I see firms actually have those written down. You might talk about it, but I don't see much committed to paper. And whilst I'm not one of those American guys who rings a bell every time something good happens, I do tend to know that the most successful people on earth do tend to write things down when it turns to goals and KPIs and all what they want to achieve. Cross-selling is a part of the practice that everybody talks about. How successful that is, I'm not sure. And that's a real thing that highlights culture. If you've got a culture of inclusivity, who owns the client relationship? Is it the partner in the fee earner? Is it the firm's client? You know, those things are very important. And, you know, do we have market sectors that we particularly want to go for? Do we have referral strategies and partners? So there's so many different things that firms could or should have, but many of them don't track their efforts. So, you know, you will see it, you know, you talk at great length about how to get the best out of practice management systems and so on. And one of the things there that most law firms fall down on is I'll say to them, okay, you know, tell me every new client that you brought on board in the calendar year of 2021 and tell me the source of the work. And very few people can accurately tell me that, because they don't press a button on the software that says you have to give us a, you know, a source file code to enter it in, or it'll say referral, but it doesn't say who from. And they might be spending thousands of dollars on an AdWords campaign. They don't actually know what quality or how much work they're winning from it. So there's, to use a Aussie phrase, there's heaps of telltale signs that I would say there's no BD culture in the firm.
And that's a really interesting point. There's two things I want to pick up on there, Alistair. One is the capturing of the referral source. And this is one of the critical tips that we give any law firm when doing one of our simplest services, which is a health check. And we just simply ask them, do you capture the referral source of every single matter that comes into your office? And what is interesting about that is a lot of firms will spend an extreme amount of money on marketing efforts that really bear no fruit. And I believe, and one of the symptoms I see from that is that they actually don't capture their referral sources. Now, a practice that gets all of their work from external referrals from, let's say, other professions such as accountants or financial planners, even real estate agents, there is your source of work. So why then spend $6,000 a month on Google AdWords? And understanding that is such an important thing. But getting back to the cultural piece, one of the things that we do at Lawganised is a comprehensive firm review. And one of the things that many of the followers of my LinkedIn post would read of late is this mantra that I continually push. And that mantra is, firms with strong cultures just do it better. And just do it better is a very broad statement in relation to so many operational aspects of the practice, but in particular, business development, in particular, change. And when major change programs are being rolled out in a practice, such as new technology, new processes, or whatever they might be, a firm with a strong culture can accept, buy in, and absorb that change so much better than a firm that has, dare I say, a cynical approach to change. When we do our reviews on law firms, we ask 3 questions to assess where we believe culture may be. Now, those 3 questions are, do you feel safe in admitting that you've made a major mistake to anyone in the practice? Second question is, do you feel safe in asking for help for any reason? For instance, a lack of knowledge or a personal matter, or even a time constraint you can't meet. And the third question is, do you feel safe respectfully disagreeing with your colleagues in any way, shape, or form? Now, if the answer is no to, or a resounding no to all those 3 questions, those questions can indicate, or those responses can indicate, that there is potentially a toxic culture in the firm. And that can lead to a range of other issues. And one of the common things we see is a lack of trust, and we'll probably get into that a little bit later.
So I know you're big on something called 5 dysfunctions of a team. So maybe, as I recognise that phrase you've just used in conversations we've had between us in the past, and I think don't you have a funny story to tell where you once went into a firm to do your diagnostic session, and the partners just almost within half an hour gave you all the wrong vibes, and you basically down tools and said, right, we can't progress until you do a trust session instead?
Absolutely. So yeah, around about 2 years ago, I was engaged by a law firm to run a strategic planning day, and typical day with all the entire firm was in the room, but it was more of it's called a strategic planning and a CPD day, but focused more on probably, dare I say, operational aspects such as time recording and a few business development things. But in the first half hour, so let's say I started at 9, within a half an hour, I could feel the vibe in the room. And the vibe was something, was quite, probably toxic would be the right word. There was conflict already. There was limited buy-in. There was a lot of eye rolling. And at around 9:30, I just said, stop. I just said, this is going absolutely nowhere. There's absolutely no point in developing a plan in this firm when these people, they didn't even A, know each other, B, like each other, and C, in particular, trust each other. So I told everyone to go away. I did a bit of work, got some prep done, and we ended up running a trust workshop. It's a specific workshop that we run at Lawganised for firms that want to enhance the trust in their team. And you did mention one of my Bibles, which was the 5 Dysfunctions of a Team by Patrick Lencioni. This is in my view, one of the strongest books in relation to team cohesion and trust that you can get. It's a leadership fable, so it's a story about a CEO by the name of Catherine who takes over a toxic team and turns that team utilizing the 5 dysfunctions or utilizing the 5 elements of a high-performing team to build a very, very high-performing team. And the first thing she worked on was trust. In Lencioni's 5 dysfunctions, he uses the absence of trust as the key to dysfunction. And it is something I see in so many practices. And it's something you can see through relationships, through someone's unwillingness to admit a mistake, for instance, because they don't trust the person they're dealing with. And it is such an important thing to get right.
So I'm going to say that's probably quite common in a number of law firms. Lawyers are quite competitive. People are generally quite, academic in a lot of roles. There's no one wants to be seen as doing something incorrectly. We're all perfectionists, but particularly lawyers. So, is there anything that people listening could take on board? And how do you, without giving up every secret away, if you were to go in with a brief of building trust in a firm, where do you start?
Well, look, as I mentioned in the definition of culture, it talks about the personality and the character of your organization. So my view is, in order to understand that, you've got to understand intimately the individual personalities within your firm. So when we run a trust workshop, we actually undertake personality type profiling. And the profile we use is called DISC. Others who are listening to today's presentation might know of other personality type profiles, such as the Myers-Briggs profile. I find DISC far more effective in a team environment because it actually is designed to enhance relationships between others by understanding. And that understanding is knowing where that person is coming from based upon a personality type. Now, DISC is an acronym for D, dominance, I, influence, S, steadiness, and C, cautiousness, or otherwise some people call it conscientiousness. Look, I prefer to use the D for delivery rather than dominance because the people in the D area of DISC just like to get stuff done. But their focus on relationships is probably a lower priority. So I really focus on that initially and develop a really in-depth understanding of everybody in the team. And we actually profile firms on a DISC map. And we actually produce a circle with a whole series of names all over the map. And then for the firms that have done the trust workshop, we give that map to them. We ask that they pin it on their desks or at their workstations so that they actually know everyone around them, where they sit on the DISC profile, and perhaps by just a quick glance, knowing that this particular person's very cautious, very conscientious, perhaps is going to be a little bit more focused on quality and detail as opposed to someone who's more focused on delivery. So it's a really good thing to have a look at when you really want someone, for instance, to do a proofread of an advice before it goes out, Or for me, if I want someone to deliver a project on time, I give it to a D person. So we start with personality type profiling, Alistair.
It opens up, we've only got a limited window of time today, but, one of the things that I'm very conscious of in law firms is that many law firms actually are very proud of the fact they're quite old institutions, but they've still got the same hierarchy and setup and meritocracy they had when they were built. But now, 20 years on, 50 years on, 100 or more years on, the same structures are in place, but the personalities underneath have changed completely. But the roles and the people in them haven't had the benefit of being rethought or replanned. So I'm guessing that's a key component to consider, is it?
And it is, and it does require a lot of vulnerability to go through this. And we find that the firms that succeed the most really open their doors. And when I mean that metaphorically, there is a section of our trust workshop that we actually call Getting Naked. Now, I would never subject anyone to that physically with me, but it is a metaphor for what we need them to do in that particular session. We need absolute 100% transparency and vulnerability, because only when that comes can you really develop strong relationships. And I think about some of the trust workshops we've run where people who really have in the professional sphere no relationship whatsoever. They could be difference in age, difference in gender, difference in title, difference in role, whatever. But through a trust workshop, they've found a common characteristic. And it actually could be through, say, tragedy, could be through the experience of a disease or anything like that. And it brings them together. Now, that's a really extreme example, but it can really show what you can achieve when you do get naked and really understand each other. And it does break down those sort of traditional hierarchical walls you spoke of.
So another thing I'm pretty sure we've spoken about in the past, and I know we agree on, and whilst we're not going to repeat Simon Sinek here, but his whole concept around start with your why, so everyone has a common purpose in the team, is a good place to start, I would have thought.
It is, and I talk about Bibles, and I have another one here. And look, again, that is a really important aspect of a practice as well, and it comes down to one of those again dysfunctions, but I prefer to call them elements of a high-performing team. That is the collective commitment, and that commitment's got to be to something. And you and I have spoken about this a lot, and that is in that BD space. Why are they doing it? What's the ultimate outcome of doing these things? Why am I going to functions after hours and networking with other potential leads and referrers? And why am I writing content during my day to become a thought leader in a particular area of law? If you understand why, it's so much easier. I mean, Alistair, do you see the firms that have that clear commitment to a mission or a why statement? Are they, in your view, the ones that deliver stronger BD outcomes?
Yes, it's quite funny because mission and vision statements are misunderstood things, and people think they're Americanisms and they're a pain in the neck. But occasionally I'll go in a firm and they actually have a vision or a mission statement on the wall in reception, or that people quote it on the website, and I actually say, well, no one actually cares. Because to me, the mission statement is a value internally. So everyone internally understands what the organization is trying to do, apart from make profit. Why does it exist beyond making money? Yep. Which is a good place to start. And then to me, the vision statement is where you start adding numbers. So it's a business turning over X with so many headcount in so many offices by whatever, and everyone understands how they work towards it. And then a good leader, which we'll come to, I'm sure, as well at some point, explains to every individual in that organization how the role they play helps the overall team hit its goals. And everyone feels bought into it. And unfortunately, historically, many law firms are fairly secretive places where equity partners or managing partners keep a lot of things secretive and never share or divulge information further down the food chain, if you allow me to use that phrase. And as a result, people don't buy into it. And, and I know that organizations that really perform well, people feel part of the process that drives what they're trying to achieve. And so if people are disenfranchised from that process, they've got a job, not a career. They're kind of And the whole thing is delivered around client service. You know, in law firms, we sell people and we sell service, clues in the title, professional services. And if you have people who are only engaged at 6 or 7 out of 10, they're unlikely to deliver service at a level that's worth a referral. So if you want people running through walls for you at 9 or 10 out of 10 and be highly motivated, you need to think about all these things and the communication that goes with it and what's required. And unfortunately, in law firms, there's still historically lots of managing partners who are there because they build the most. Or they reluctantly, they didn't take when everyone said, who's put your hand up who wants to be managing partner, he didn't stand back, or she didn't stand back quick enough and was left holding the mantle. And it doesn't mean that they were the best leader at all.
Absolutely. The old chestnut, do we promote technicians or do we promote good leaders? But I just want to pick up on something you said, and that was what I believe is critically important and what I refer to as the cascade. And the cascade is starting with the why statement and ensuring that each and every single person in the firm, and I mean literally everybody in the firm, buys into that why statement and understands it and what their role is in delivering it. Now, just to use a quick anecdote, and I believe a why statement should be client-centric. And I do see a lot of why statements or vision statements, call it what you will, Alistair, that are very much around the aspirations of the legal practice. And that might read something along the lines of insert firm name, aims to be the leading insert area of law practice in or on the East Coast of Australia.
Am I allowed to yawn at this point?
Yeah, absolutely. And I read that as a potential client of that firm, and I look at it and I go, well, so all my fees are doing that I pay you is helping you be the leading firm. Now, the firms that I believe have a client-centric why statement, who have really thought about it, have got clients who read that and can really resonate with the outcome. And one of the best examples I've got is, and when I run my own workshops to try and explore why statements, I really drill hard at each principal to understand what their why is by asking the same question over and over again. So what, so what, so what? And what we get to is eventually the ultimate outcome, which is for the client. And a family law firm that does some specialization in ART, or otherwise known as surrogacy and fertility law. ART is a bit of a name drop, assisted reproductive therapy. They focused in on enabling life and simplifying life. So we ended up with a why statement that simply read, life enabled, life simplified. So all the staff, including the early career solicitors, the paralegals, the secretaries, all they know is that they are there to enable their clients to have children and to simplify that process for them. That's all they're about. Letters, emails, communication on the phone, everything has to be simple. And it really resonates all the way through. And I think it's really important to get that right. And again, they're not about wanting to be the leading ART law firm in Australia. They just want a great outcome for their clients. And I think getting that right is important. And again, utilizing a really strong why statement is great for your marketing. You know, when you actually write it out, what we're about, it's a fantastic result for your marketing.
Just from my perspective, there was because I haven't always done law firms. I had a life prior to law firms in grocery or fast-moving consumer goods, as it was known. And in that world, there was a study undertaken by Procter & Gamble, which is one of the largest of those firms on earth, asking about why people bought things. So they had lots of opportunity to have meetings, but they weren't closing the meetings. And this is a common issue with lawyers. So I say to them, you know, have you got a marketing problem, i.e. you can't get enough meetings with prospective clients or referrers, or do you go and have those meetings, but they don't turn into dollars? And often, I hate to say it, but most law firms don't have a marketing problem per se. They have a sales or conversion problem, which means they don't say the right things in front of those people. And I have empathy with them. Where do you learn that skill? But the issue is that in the research by Procter & Gamble, they found that disengaged or seemingly uninspired or unhappy people, clients didn't want to buy from those types of people. So it's very easy to put across in your language, your body language, that you're not happy with the organization you're in if you're not motivated, and that comes across, and as a result, people don't buy services from you. And I think
And that goes back to what you said about leadership before, and having a commitment to a why or to a vision. And one of the things, again, that we talk about at Lawganised with firms is create raving fans, and create raving fans primarily in your workforce, your people, and then you create raving fans in clients. And I'm going to come back to the point you made about leaders, because I think it's a really important characteristic of any business, but in particular law firms, where, you know, we have seen over many, many years the highest performing billers, let's say fee earners, end up in leadership roles. Do you see? Well, let's first ask the question, Alistair. Do you see that as a common trait in many a law firm? Yes.
Well, it depends on the size. Okay, so you still have a lot of family-owned first, second, third generation firms. So someone's got their name above the door, and I hate to say it, but occasionally politics plays a part. Okay, and gets in the way. So there is a power scenario, or with equity partners who have the power. And then as the firm grows, and if I go into give you some experiences in larger firms, I actually see people who have the title Chief Executive Officer, but if we're being honest, they don't make any decisions because the equity partners still make all the decisions. So it's nice to have the title, but they don't actually have that end decision-making power. And politics plays a, you know, I can't be naive, it's a challenge everywhere, but at least if leaders are aware of the issue and go out of the way to stop politicking in their organization, most firms would do better. And there are some firms who are successful despite themselves, not because of themselves.
Great.
And you've seen it, you know, it happens a lot. But, you know, going back, the whole thing is a training thing. You know, firms that do well train the people. People are the asset. We keep talking about this. And I constantly go and say, you know, law firms are 80% people and 20% everything else. So you have to get the people bit right. So you should be obsessed about training your people, upskilling them in a whole huge number of soft skills, as well as technical skills, client service, the whole thing.
Well, you mentioned your retail, fast-moving consumer goods background. You look at those Procter & Gamble's and the like, they intently focus on the quality of their products. You think about the sea of products that Procter & Gamble have got under their umbrella. It's research and development, it's constant market testing, it's in and out of the market, emphasized brand, the whole lot. In professional services, we have people, and it is about developing people, delivering client service through those people. And one of the things that I regularly say in whatever service we offer, a health check or a comprehensive review, whatever, that the only input to productivity in a law firm is time. Now, input to productivity in retail or construction or whatever, you've got product coming in the door. You always use my analogy of a Toyota factory. But in a law firm, it's time. Regardless of what your billing methodology is, it has to be time. And at the end of the day, that time has to be recorded well and by good people with good skills. Or the old saying, skill and knowledge applied to a matter. And that comes from building a great team and a great culture. The people that become raving fans become your strongest assets.
Sure. So I've got to, at some point, take us back to the practice leader.
Yep.
Managing partner or the person with the name above the door. Because they ultimately, you know, culture starts at the top. I don't think anyone would really argue with that. So I think we both agreed that there was an article I posted some years ago. It's still on the website, talking about evaluation of the leadership group and the types of things that you should do there. Now, I'll be honest with you. You know, I sourced a lot of that, having had a conversation with Patrick J. McKenna, who wrote a book called First Among Equals. But it talks about how people would score a practice leader. And I don't think there are too many leaders in firms who would actually go through this process or actually request their partners to go through this and get some feedback. I'm not quite sure how many people do it. I don't think it's a lot. Similarly, client feedback seems to be a thing that's not undertaken anywhere near as well as it could be. You know, you mentioned earlier my background with big firms like Procter & Gamble. You know, you mentioned the word R&D. if you take that, I don't see much R&D on legal service where we're asking clients for feedback and having listening groups. Some do it, but 95% probably don't. And I often say, well, when's the last time you asked a client about that service, how you charge for it, how you deliver it? Well, we don't need it. We know what our clients want. The amounts of times I hear that is extraordinary. And I go, that's really dangerous, because they do change their mind, and they don't benchmark you against another law firm. They benchmark you against ringing Amazon up during COVID, and it didn't cost them any more, and it was there tomorrow morning.
That's it.
So you don't compare yourself with other law firms, because they're not the best people to compare yourself against, but they're comparing you with Apple and other beasts, if you like.
Yeah, and that's a really important point about, assessing quality and looking at those things. We assess each other's work in terms of, do we adhere to particular quality standards, but are we really investing in the types of matters and the work that we do on each, and investigating whether it's the right thing to do or not? Again, goes back to testing on retail products. But
do we also still have an obsession with billable hours that's unhealthy?
Look, I do have some polarizing view, or I can create a view that can be quite polarizing here. I am a strong supporter of alternative billing methodologies. Nothing wrong with any value billing, fixed fee. In fact, I encourage it. But I do say this, and when we ran a comprehensive review of a legal practice recently, that do not record any time whatsoever on any matter. Everything's a no win, no fee, fixed fee matter. Sorry. I asked the principal, "Do you record any of your time at all?" And he said, "No, we're not. We don't like recording time." So the focus of recording time for mine is not about holding Alistair Marshall accountable for the time that he takes to deliver a matter. The focus of recording time is to deliver data to that critical point I made earlier. The only input to productivity in a law firm is time. And one of the things we ask law practices to recognize is their cost of doing business for every hour of every human being in the business. Now, without data to understand what it takes to deliver a matter, and let's just use a really simple example, writing a will. Let's say that your firm does a simple will for $350. If I told you, following a review of your firm, that your average cost per human hour is $100, then that particular matter is not profitable when you exceed 3.5 hours on that will. Now, it's going to vary by person, but having a one standard number is really important. And the only way to get that is to record time. Now, I'm not saying forever. I'm saying let's record time on a particular matter. Let's record time for a few months. Let's record time in a particular team, whatever you want to do, but we need some data to show that point. And there's absolutely no point in having non-profitable matters consistently run through your practice. Conveyancing is a prime example.
Well, this isn't necessarily my space, because I know you're a man of financial hygiene much more so than I, but I do get frustrated by the poor quality of precedent libraries.
Yep.
And as a result, how much time is wasted.
100%. And people often ask me, "Oh, it's a fixed fee, Ben, what can we do?" Well, we can look at automating features of that matter. We can look at better precedents. We can look at document automation. We can look at workflow automation. All the systems out there across a number of practice management systems. And a lot of our users will be using products like Leap, Practice Evolve, Open Practice, Action Step, you name it. You can automate steps in your process to get faster.
My take on practice management systems is a bit like an iPhone. That'll do hundreds of things, and I probably ask it to do 2 or 3. And I think,
oh, that's my iceberg effect that I talk about, Alistair, where most systems that people utilize are probably utilized to about 1/8 of their capacity.
Sure.
So that's probably a conversation for an entirely different podcast or entirely different presentation. But
well, I'm going to try and pull us back to around the culture piece and its thing with BD and the importance of the leader. So the article I referred to earlier, the Patrick McKenna article, lists a whole host of things that a leader could or should be. And, the first thing on that list is being more encouraging than critical, which goes back to your trust thing that you mentioned very early on. and accessible and, effective and fair communication, concerned about long-term, not just short-term profits.
Absolutely. So you're right. The leader encourages, and the leader, and let's get back into leadership styles, I guess, a little bit. And that is the leadership style that I encourage, that if I could say early career solicitors are looking to become future leaders of their firms or a firm, is a model called servant leadership. Your day, your efforts are focused on ensuring your people have what they need to succeed.
Yeah.
Now that's a very broad overview of what servant leadership is. But if you can totally focus on ensuring your people have the tools and the knowledge and the experience to succeed, you will have a successful firm.
Well, I've got a thing here that talks about acts more like a coach than a boss. And I think one of the best quotes I've heard on the leadership piece was, there was a time it was all about you, but the day you become a leader, it's now all about them.
Absolutely right.
And I don't think enough people get that.
Absolutely right. And I think if you're in a leadership role and you believe that you are to be served, I would challenge you that you've got the mindset wrong about your leadership role. Sure. A leadership role is about others. And
some of those others, one thing I just want to get to, because again, going back to the old David Meister books of the 80s, there were some classic things in there around dealing with underperformers. So I hate to say it, but most firms, regardless of size, have one or two underperformers.
Yep.
And in my view, it undermines the management team and the culture of the place if the managing partner or the management team aren't seen to address it. So there's too many times where I go in and they go, well, that's John, bless him, he's been here 20 years and he doesn't, he hasn't hit his billables target for about 3 or 4 years, but he's a good guy and he's only 2 years away from retirement, so we'll just brush that under the carpet because we don't like confrontation. Is that an attitude that you still see in a number of firms?
Oh, look, absolutely. And the unfortunate side effect of this is, and let's use BD. Let's come back to BD as an example. The higher performers in relation to BD, the people that regularly push the quality of the firm and regularly writing content, they're regularly out there bringing work in the door. When they do that and they see management not dealing with poor performers, then they get demotivated and the good people leave. And it's often a ripple effect around the poor performer. And this is nothing revolutionary, but I do see that when we look at things like performance management, those sort of things, that because it's a conflict situation invariably, or a fear of conflict, the desire to gloss over, sweep it under the carpet, not deal with it. Meanwhile, the really, really high performers, and let's say that again, those that were doing a lot of BD work, they're sitting there going, oh, come on, Ben, come on, Alistair, you need to deal with this guy.
Okay, so larger firms, and larger usually is around the 50 humans mark.
Yep.
People get to a stage where there's enough human issues that they bring in an HR function.
Yep.
What I guess I'm going to talk to, and I'm conscious of time, is that would you advise a smaller firm, maybe with a headcount of 20 to 30, should they outsource an HR function to take on some of those challenging conversations, even if it's only for a day a week or by the hour or something?
Well, look, this is where I may differ slightly, Alistair. I don't believe that a conversation of that nature is an HR function. Yes, a good quality HR advisor can guide a principal or a senior leader on having that conversation, but I certainly don't recommend them outsourcing that function, if that's what you were suggesting. However, sorry, go ahead.
No, only that. I know outsourcing is a big thing again, it's a bit of a bell curve. It works very well for a certain size, but then firms get bigger and more successful, and they actually often find it insourcing is a better option. So there's
absolutely
there's two. It's like marketing and BD would be another thing.
And I was just going to say on that very topic. In fact, that exact example, in a previous life, I have been asked in by a principal of a particular practice area to deal with an underperforming employee. That employee eventually was let go during a probation period, but the lack of respect that employee departing had for the fact that his principal wasn't involved in that conversation was palpable. And he was sitting there saying, I can't believe you're having this conversation with me, Ben. and insert name is not willing to have it with me himself.
Sure.
And I believe it's a really, really important aspect of a leadership role in any business, that if you have an issue, and an analogy that I often utilize, again, in a team that has trust and a team that has high accountability to each other, is the analogy of the sporting coach at halftime. That coach can see his or her team performing suboptimally and can absolutely tear shreds off. Now, I'm not in any way suggesting that we tear shreds, but what I'm using is the extreme example that a coach can yell at players and the players respond in the second half. Now, the reason they respond is because they have trust. They have trust in that coach. That coach is not dealing with the people. The coach is dealing with the issue. And if you can dissect that and realize it's not about me as Ben, it's about the issue of what's happening, then it's a totally different mindset to look at things.
Sure. Now, I'm conscious of time.
Indeed.
We could have almost a whole hour on KPIs and what could or should be measured. I talk a lot about measuring clients, measuring, you're big on the financial performance, but I don't think there's enough around internal processes and employees, and even, let's say, 360 reviews with leaders and all these kind of things. But I'm going to use the GR phrase. I'm going to use the Great Reset. All right, so everyone's talking about it. I don't know whether it's going to come here or not. My clients who are recruiters tell me it's starting. There is a place for it. So I think Danny Gilbert from Gilbert and Tobin wrote last week in the AFR and Lawyers Weekly about the initiatives, if that's the right phrase, on how to instill culture in a hybrid office situation, above and beyond just paying more.
Yep.
So again, I went to many managing partners who last June told me they'd all hit record profits. And then since June, they've just been leaking it, paying additional salary and overhead costs to keep the best people.
Yep.
So quickly, what good initiatives have you seen beyond financials for motivation and to reduce staff turnover in some of the organisations you've worked with?
Well, look, just to come back to the Danny Gilbert article, I thought that was a fantastic article. And, if I could just slide the soapbox under my feet, my position on this great reset, great resignation, whatever you call it, is that it is a self-fulfilling prophecy if you want to rely on that. And therefore, I believe it's an excuse. Now, to answer your question now, the teams that invest in their people and to talk with them, to give them clear direction, to give them good, solid leadership, good development, and have trusting, open relationships, again, based on leaders that are what I call vulnerability-based leaders, who are willing to share their strengths and weaknesses. And as a leader, we surround ourselves with good people. We need to surround ourselves with people who are better than us. So I think it's those things and those leaders that are willing to have those conversations that I think are the best cultures, coming back to BD. And coming back to the point of our webinar today. But I think that it's that willingness to each and every single person commit to a similar goal in that why statement and have clear direction to everybody is what creates the better outcomes. And speaking of which, one of the things I wanted to talk to you about, Alistair, was I mentioned before my example of a firm that I believe transformed from what I felt on the day was quite toxic to a trusting environment, and has since had a great outcome longer term, 2 years down the track. But can you give me an example of your work and walking into a firm and seeing something that you've believed needed significant attention from your perspective, and what's been the result of those?
Well, from a BD perspective, there is a perception that big firms do it better than small ones, and I'm here to deliver the message that I just don't believe that for a minute. I think it's down to individuals. And again, going back to honesty and trust where it starts, I worked over the last 2 years with some partners who fell out of one of the top law firms in the country and set up on their own. So initially you would think, oh, well, they must have been trained well in BD. And they reached out and said, actually, we didn't get trained well in BD. We kind of have some idea, but we don't really know how to do it on a practical day-to-day level. So can you assist? And their honesty was refreshing. So we had a blue sky thing about what do you know and what you don't know. One of my biggest problems as a consultant, and I'm sure you share it, is that you have all this knowledge in your head, but you don't know which is going to be the most valuable. So like you run diagnostic scenarios, that's exactly what I do. So I'll often say, well, look, here's the most common problems I see. Tell me which ones are specific to you, and those are the ones we'll try and fix. So in their case, their targeting was all over the place. So they wanted to do commercial litigation for everybody, and they lacked the confidence to charge the previous hourly rates that they were charging at the big firm. And I said, well, why? The client's still buying you and your IP. It's just the invoice comes from a different person. And they were like, oh, well, we can't charge what we used to charge. And they were charging like literally half. And I was like, you can't do that. Because from a marketing and BD perspective, price it's an influencer. So I love the phrase Stella Artois, reassuringly expensive. Now, when I go and ask clients where they thought the value was in a project with me, usually I get two answers. One is the confidence to actually go out and do BD because now we know what's expected of us. And the second one is you gave us the confidence to put our rates up. And you can imagine if you're charging 400 an hour and all of a sudden you're charging 550 an hour to new clients, obviously you wouldn't be doing it to all your existing ones. The effect on the bottom line and a lot of the KPIs that you measure in finance is unbelievable. And then you can reinvest that money in new initiatives and it snowballs quite quickly. So I've got a number of people I can think of where that took place, and it's a real success story.
And that's a great example.
You can't do it.
Yeah, that's a great example of how a micro effect can have, a micro adjustment can have such a macro effect on a practice.
Huge.
And coming back to BD and getting everything right, having the right culture in place, having that confidence, as you said, and then delivering, the outcome can be quite profound. And again, I can get quite enthusiastic about this topic because I see that the slightest of change, and I often use the analogy of a Formula One car. All you need to do is get a couple of seconds a lap for making slight changes here and there across the vehicle. And overall, across the entire Grand Prix, across the entire season, that vehicle drives so much faster. And law firms and professional services firms in general can really do the same thing.
Okay, because I know we like a good discussion and I'm looking at time, I'm going to ask you to come up with a summary statement or a key takeaway or something that people can write down and say, okay, if we don't do that, we're going to start doing that tomorrow. So can you think of one or two things that you might leave as a parting gift to the listener?
Well, look, I think the key thing to start with is have a definitive why statement that you can all commit to, and have a business plan that involves those metrics, that involves those commitments from everybody, including those to business development. And aligned to that, we've got a team that's built upon vulnerability-based trust with strong leaders. So a few elements there. One is commitment to a collective goal, and two is a trusting team. I think if we get those two things right, within that goal will be delivering on a business development objective. And with raving fans in your employee group, you're going to have great outcomes.
Okay, so on people initiatives, because I want to try and keep it to the topic, I'm going to go for, as well as having incentives, there should be consequences for non-achievement. So we've got to have those thorny conversations. You must train people. Don't expect them to be able to do everything because they won't be able to do it. It's not something you learn in law school. And you need the right people in the right positions doing the right things. So if I'm a technical person, get them to write blogs. Don't ask them to go networking because it's going to ruin your brand and they won't particularly enjoy the experience. But I'm going to leave people with get a discipline. It's better to turn up every day and be consistent. If you look at people who are successful, it's not like they do it ad hoc. So when I haven't got much work on my desk, I'll do some BD today, or I'll wait till Friday afternoon to do it. They do some every day or certain hours in a week, and the consistency, show up, show up, show up. It makes such a difference.
Absolutely. Great points.
Okay, I'm going to draw that to a close. I do apologize for our earlier technical shenanigans. We didn't mean to any harm to anybody. I hope you enjoy the recording. If you want to reach out to Ben, do you want to just give people where they should best find you?
Yeah, get in touch with myself and the rest of the team at Lawganised. Probably best to go via our website, lawganised.com.au, or give us a call, 07 3017 4771. And Alistair.
Yes, I would advocate sending them to professionalservicesbd.com.au, where I would advise you to download the ebook, Immediate Actions to Generate Revenue and Cash, or by all means, reach out to me on LinkedIn or any other way. On that note, I'm going to draw this to a close. If you have any other topics you'd like me and Ben to discuss in a future issue or adaptation for an hour, then please do check in. And I hope you enjoyed it all. I'll speak to you all very soon. Thanks now.
Thanks, Alistair. Thanks, everybody.
Cheers now. Bye-bye.